Dennis, let's forget that the store is open. Let's forget about the noise outside. Let's forget about the customers knocking at the door, and let's talk. All right?
Sure. What do you want to know?
What I want to know. When it all started, because I remember going to your garage a couple of years ago, and I was just like, what is happening here? What is happening here? So many slot cars, so many RC stuff, and the perfect setup for somebody who wants to build stuff. And by the time I was just starting scratch building chassis, and I learned a lot over there. And I want you to tell me a little bit more about when you started doing this whole thing as a hobby, and now as a professional slot car person, whatever it can be called.
Okay. Are we on?
Yeah, we're on.
Okay, we're on. It started in 1963, Christmas.
Okay.
Christmas, we got a VIP set with these little cars.
Set.
VIP, it was a British manufacturer.
Okay.
They were in competition with Scalextric.
Okay.
They made a track that was... The track was made out of steel.
All right.
Plugged together the same as most normally did. And
hold on. Track made of steel?
this track was made of steel. It was each straight piece was 3 pieces of steel, a center piece and 2 outside pieces, held together with plastic ties across there. And then they plugged together like a normal one would.
All right.
The interesting thing that, because of that, was that the center section, because then what they did was they painted the track, but the steel was the conductor.
Yeah.
So the steel was the braid and everything else, right? Which meant that...
Let me interrupt you. Let me show your VIP car over here. There's the Focus right there. Look at this. The VIP car, original.
Yeah, it's a VIP
1963
Lotus 18. Christmas of 1963.
And that's the original car?
No.
Ah, okay.
No.
You found out another one.
I found another one and a couple more. In fact, for Christmas of 2013, which was 50 years later, I collected enough track that I bought on eBay and cars, and I set up the original little figure of 8 that my brother and I got for Christmas in 1963. I set it up again and I raced on it. I actually have a video somewhere at home.
50th anniversary celebration.
The 50th anniversary. It was the funnest Christmas I've ever had. I think the 50th was even more fun than the first one.
Of course.
But anyway, so that's where it started.
And where did you find this model? You found on eBay?
On eBay. Yeah.
Okay.
There's a lot of stuff out there, So it started there, and I was just going into high school in 1964. And when I got into high school...
Oh, hold on. 64 high school? So you got into this game late. You were like 16, 17. 15.
You wish.
I don't want to make math, but...
1964, I turned 13.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
All right, so I was 12-something when we got these cars.
Oh, okay.
And then I went into high school, and in the May of 64, I turned 13. Okay, so I'm in high school.
You're in high school with 13 years old, so
yes.
It's a little bit different.
Yeah, because we had a primary school up to 12, and then we had a high school. There was no middle school.
All right.
So you had six grades and 6 grades.
No, you're talking. I think I ended high school with 17, so it might be around the same age, 14, 15, 16.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, so when I got to high school, then a lot of other guys had slot cars, and we started looking around. And there were 2 really really good hobby stores in the downtown area of Johannesburg.
Okay.
Where I lived at that stage, and so
that's like full raceways with racing programs.
Just a hobby store.
Shop. Okay.
It was a hobby shop,
selling sets and stuff like that.
Like they had models, they had trains, they had planes, they had slot cars. These new things, and I used to get on the bus, go in there on a Saturday morning because all of that was in the downtown area. Because in those days, Johannesburg's downtown was the business district, and it bustled over a weekend with people shopping and so on. I used to go in there, and I used to stand in the hobby store, and we would be like 4 people deep at the counter, right along the whole counter, and all we were buying was slot cars.
Okay.
And we started either with Scalextric or with VIP, and then you build more sets, and then I started looking at all this American stuff that was starting to come in. Revell, Atlas, Monogram, Cox,
KNB,
I started looking at this stuff, but it was a little expensive. So I started saving.
Was it expensive because it was more expensive, or just because it was an imported?
It was
product?
imported, and so it was just more expensive anyway. I mean, the exchange rate was very good in those days, but the quality was a lot better.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I saved my pocket money all the way through the year. And when it came almost Christmas of '64, I think, or maybe the following year, I don't remember, I bought a monogram Ford GT. Okay. And that was my car in those days, right? And this is, again,
a similar one.
Not the original.
Okay.
But
the same.
The same, yes.
Let me put it here. Let me show you here on the camera. There we go. Ford GT.
And so we played with these things at home for a while, and then a couple of the guys at high school started talking about this place called Pix Raceways. And I said, what is that? And it turned out in a suburb, about 2 suburbs over from where I lived, there opened a commercial raceway.
Okay.
And it had this massive 8-lane track in the store.
Oh.
And
like wooden routed track.
Routed track, massive 8-lane routed track in the store, and
imagine people,
parts,
boys just crying
everywhere, and high school boys out the door, right? And it was about 40 minutes ride on my bicycle from my house to get there. 20 minutes back, but 40 minutes ride there. Because it was at the top of a really long hill.
Oh my God.
Right? So it would take you like 15 minutes to pedal up this. It was one of those really weird hills. It was just steep enough that you really had to pedal, but not that steep that you would want to get off and push the bicycle, right?
It's just like in the middle, right?
Just,
in the middle.
Just in the middle. Terrible. Anyway.
Well, today we're just going to push the bike.
Yeah, today I would just open the throttle a little more. Right? So I used to go up there and play and take my monogram cars.
How big was the track?
About 150 odd feet. It only had one banked corner though, one big banked corner. It was not a standard design.
Can you go flat on these days with the car?
No, right? Not in those days. No. You couldn't. Not in the days of Cox Chaparrals and Cheetahs and these cars. You couldn't take the bank flat out.
All right. And what color was the track?
Black, pitch black, and dirty. Ugh. After years, I mean, the thing never got cleaned. There was glue and stuff all over the place.
So after
trip.
Christmas '63, 1 year later, we found out about this big raceway.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
And then once I found out about this place, I started playing with these, and then I started finding out about scratch building. Because my parents were very, very good at that, in that if you had some kind of interest in something, they would support that with whatever they could. And in my case, with the slot cars, it was magazines.
Okay.
And they got me a subscription to the British Model Car magazine. It was Model Car and Miniature Auto. And it started coming out in about 1963 or so.
Okay.
And I had every copy from the first one to the last one in 1972, because they had the subscription for me and they just kept it going over all the years. And so I kept every copy.
You can mail order those things, right?
Yes, although I didn't really mail order a lot at that time. What I did do, though, was I also had a newsletter that came from a hobby store in Port Elizabeth, which was one of the coastal cities in South Africa, who used to send out this newsletter about slot car racing and where the clubs were and who was doing what and what all the new stuff was. And that came in the mail like once a month, right? So you'd be waiting for the mailman to get this new newsletter from Hobbies International, the place was called.
So you know the whole catalogs and your parts and your cars.
Oh yeah, so and then I would write them letters and say, I'm really looking for this and this, and then they would say, oh sorry, that's 1/24th scale. We don't do that, because everything in South Africa in those early days was 1/32nd.
Okay, just like the UK.
Just like the UK,
right.
Because I mean we were an ex-UK colony and South Africa anyway, so most of it was
Commonwealth,
and part of the Commonwealth.
Yeah.
Anyway,
But the local raceway, did they bring like new stuff like that? Do they have like races and there was competition?
Yeah. I used to go up there and race.
Okay.
And the racing was casual. I mean, it wasn't, in the early days, it was run what you bring, you know. Whatever you had there on a Saturday afternoon, the guy would say, "Okay, we're going to run a race," and they put down he had a big piece of wood that he would put down at the start line and to stop you at the start. Then the lap counting system was one of those old ones where you had to press the button to zero it. It was like the pinball rotating counters. One of those, right? I can still remember hearing that noise.
With a little straw that your car just goes black.
No, it had a dead strip.
Okay.
It had a dead strip, and so it was pretty. That was all pretty well done.
Yeah. When I started on the 80s, on the 90s, it was just like a big counter, like a mechanical counter with a straw, and just hit the straw.
No. This one had a dead strip, so it counted properly, and you could always hear it going ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching. And then when you had to zero them, you press all these buttons. And they go ka-ching, 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 till they get to zero, and then they go ka-ching. Okay, now we're ready. Now we can start. And of course, you picked a lane and you raced the laps, right? That was it. So all the way through high school, that's pretty much what I did.
1/32 scales.
1/32 scale.
Mostly come from Hornby and UK and stuff like that.
Yeah, although in those days it was scale extric, and then we very quickly got away from regular scale extric and we got into monogram and Cox.
But it's still 1/32.
All 1/32.
Okay.
And then I started scratch building because I saw all these articles in the magazines from the UK about people who were building these cars.
And they were like kind of step by step with pictures and stuff?
Yes.
Oh,
yeah.
Good.
Building articles. So I started building. Try this, try that, try the next thing. You know, learning how to solder, right? I remember I had, the very first cars that I built that I had to solder together, the only soldering iron in the house was one of those big old plumber soldering irons with a big square tip, tapered, that you had to heat on a gas flame.
Yeah, and then come back to that.
And the only gas flame that I had was in the kitchen.
Yeah.
And I was working at my father's workbench in the garage, right, which was separate from the house.
So that was a very dangerous run.
So I had to go inside, heat the soldering iron up, come running out.
Get out of my house. Get out of my way. Get out of my way.
Do one joint, maybe two, and then the soldering iron was cold and you would go back inside and come out again. Anyway, I mean, that's how I started. Then I got better equipment later and so on. And
but you say that your parents were kind of letting you do it because they thought you were good at it and just...
Well, I think it was because I had a passion for it, or they could see the passion for it, and they were like that. That was the way that my parents were. They were very, very supportive of those kind of things. If you had a passion for something, they would support. They wouldn't enable you, but they would support you in anything, right? And so that's what I got. I mean, it wasn't like my dad. He was a doctor, and he was really a busy person, and so I didn't ever really get carted around to various places. If I wanted to go to the raceway to race, I had to get on my bicycle and go.
Okay.
Right. Sometimes my mother might pitch up to watch or whatever, but in general, I did it on my own.
So, for the point of view of your mother, who I know, I'm sorry for that. I know that she passed like not long ago.
Well, it's December last year.
Yeah, she probably saw you today to the last day as a big kid just playing around. Yeah, he's still playing with those
when
cars.
When are you going to stop playing? You'll never find a wife if you don't stop playing with cars. Why are you still playing with it? No, I mean,
she was probably he's already.
She knew. She knew. Right. And so that was how it goes. And towards the end of high school, the club racing scene was starting to develop a lot in South Africa in general. There were 1/32 scale clubs.
Okay.
Usually with a 4, sometimes a 6-lane track, wooden tracks.
All right.
And all scratch-built cars. Lexan bodies. All scratch-built cars.
Late 60s, early 70s.
Yeah, this is 68, 69, around about there.
Scratch-built brass and piano wire.
Scratch-built brass and piano wire with Mura Group 20s or Champion 517s or whatever they were in those days. And already at that stage, there was a governing body for slot car racing in South Africa. The
Okay.
South African Model Car Association was established in 1965.
All right.
And I didn't really get involved with it until a lot later.
Yeah.
But it was there and they were racing. And so at the commercial raceway, a bunch of us who liked to race those kind of cars basically formed a little club that used the commercial raceway as our track. And then we would race at these other tracks and the other clubs would come and race there. So we had this round
Some sort of a circuit.
inter-club
Yeah.
series going.
Pretty cool.
Right. That was very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I raced on a lot of other tracks at the time. And then when I was done with school and I went to...
And that's racing your own scratch build stuff?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
By the time were people asking you to build chassis for them?
No.
No?
No, my chassis were pretty scrappy in those days.
Okay.
There were a couple of guys in those clubs who built the most beautiful stuff. They were a little older than I was. There were guys who were like, they were not handymen, they were machinists,
Oh, yeah.
or they were dental technicians, people, or jewelers, people like that, building the most beautiful cars. And I looked at this and I thought, I'll never be able to build like that.
Oh, wow.
Turns out it's just practice.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
But it took me a long time.
Well, there's a
Anyway,
bit, there's a
so
bit of
I built my own cars all these years, and I experimented with all kinds of things, and I built the craziest stuff. I built four-wheel drive cars, I built front-wheel drive cars, I built sidewinders, inlines, anything you like. Right? I tried it all. I used to rewind my own motors, do all of that stuff as I was going through high school and early parts of university.
Mm-hmm.
When I graduated from university, I went north from Johannesburg to Pretoria, which is a city about 40 minutes drive north. And I joined one of those clubs that we were talking about.
You still have time to do that.
Well, now, of course, I'm working. So
Yeah.
I'm working 8 to 5, right? And then the rest of the time is mine. So this is cool. You know, I don't have to study anymore. I don't have to do any of this. I don't have anybody looking over my shoulder.
And now I have money too. Because
I
of
have
working.
some money,
Oh, yeah.
right? I have a car. I'm good.
No sip.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the club that I joined, which was a well-known club at the time, was in its death throes. It was really starting to break apart. The people were drifting away. The clubhouse in which it was located was in a very isolated spot.
And that's late 70s, right?
This is 75.
Okay, and that's still talking about Group 20, Group 12s, Muras, and...
Yes.
Okay.
Group 20s mostly is what we used to run. We used to run Group 20 armatures. We didn't bother with these little Group 20s in a B can or a C can.
Okay.
Yeah, big, heavy motors. So the club collapsed, and I joined. And so I left that club, and I joined another club in the same city, which had started up just the year before, in 1974, Pretoria Model Car Club, which I'm still an honorary
And it still
member
works.
of.
Yeah, I saw. I see
And
some
you've seen my T-shirts and my things with the PMCC on it. So
I
that's
thought
what that
PMC
is.
was for Pebblestone.
It is, but that's only because Pebblestone was named so that
Okay.
it could be the same as PMCC Pretoria Model Car Club.
Pebblestone is your own track, right?
Yes.
Your home track.
Pebblestone's my home track,
All right.
because that's the street on which I live. But that's another story. That's coming
Okay.
later. And when I joined that club, we started getting involved in the racing at a national level.
Okay.
And so all of a sudden, everything expanded in terms of technology, in terms of competition, in terms of intensity, all of that. And I mean, in that club, our race night was a Tuesday night. If you went by there on Sunday night, the lights were on and people were practicing. If you went by there on Monday night, you had to stand in line for a lane to practice. And then Tuesday night, there was like 6 square feet of floor space per person in that little building that we had. Right. And we very quickly, over a period of 4 or 5 years, became one of the top, most competitive clubs in the country. We started winning team events, and our drivers started winning things.
Were the tracks similar between those clubs? Because today we kind of have a pattern. There's only 2 or 3 like world-class builders that you can go to.
Our tracks were all built by the people who were in the clubs.
Okay, so
And
they're different between each other. That's what I
There
mean.
was
Like
a lot of
different paints.
There was a lot of difference in paints. There was a lot of There was a lot of difference in design, particularly. One thing about them was they were built to last, because there are guys now still running on tracks that were built in the 60s, right, in South Africa. For instance, we did not use braid in the beginning.
It was just like the brass.
We did not use copper tape in the beginning.
What was that?
We would route out a 3/4 of an inch wide slot, and we would sink in quarter square brass, or not 3/4, 5/8. We would sink in quarter square brass into the slot. So the side of the slot and the top for the contact was all quarter square brass all the way around.
Mm-hmm. Very expensive.
It was expensive. It was massively time consuming.
Yeah.
Because you have to fit every piece into a turn.
And make turn.
You have to put it through a roller to bend it, and you have to fit it.
Plus the connection.
Put it into a roller and bend it, right? And then you have to drill through and screw it down.
Yep.
But once it's in, it never moves, and it gives you absolutely brilliant smooth slot sides, and the surface is completely level with the track surface. So that was nice. So I raced at national level and at club level from 75 all the way through to 1989. And there's lots and lots and lots of stories involved in there. But in 1986, I got involved with a friend of mine who was also a slot car racer. Mm-hmm. In fact, I built this car for him in about 1986. And that's the sort of thing we were running in those days. Sometimes with wing cars. Yeah, with wings. 1/32 scale wing cars.
That's pretty cool.
It was very cool.
Yeah, that's very similar to what we have in Brazil, early 90s. Not that powerful of a motor. We used to race like 16Z stuff. That's very similar.
And
I'll show here on the camera.
Yeah, that friend of mine is now in Brisbane in Australia, and he painted the body. I built the chassis and the motor.
What kind of motor is that?
That's a Pro Slot Hex motor. It's one of the very first full samarium cobalt magnet motors.
And that's the kind of motor that you have to open the can yourself and glue the magnets and trim the magnets on it. And I did that a lot.
And on that chassis, the motor is part of the chassis. It's soldered on. It doesn't screw in.
Let me show the detail here.
The motor, at the back of the motor, the axle tube is soldered on straight on. And at the front, it's soldered direct onto the spring steel center section, which I cut by hand.
Yeah. Right here. Very cool. And I see some screws and some.
So that was late 1970s. No, mid 1980s. Excuse me, mid 1980s. And
yeah, I remember soldering those ball bearings and trying to align the armature.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you guys call it in English? The five turns spring.
I think Cayman or somebody was already making 5 coil springs at that stage.
Five coil springs. Coil springs. Like we call in Brazil, we call like 5 laps or something like that.
Yeah, 5 coil springs. Yes. And at that stage, we were starting to import a lot of stuff. In fact, I was doing a lot of it. I had contacts with Dan DeBella at ProSlot. I had met him when I was here in 1982. And so I was importing motors and things from him. I had also been at Speed and Sport that used to be up in Cyprus, Ron Granley's place.
I don't know.
And so I used to order from there. And so I started like a little bit of commercial interest in bringing these things in and reselling to club members and so on.
Yeah, those guys like Dan and the guys from Kofor and Alpha in the early 90s, how important they were for the slot car development.
And Palmer, of course.
And Palmer, yeah.
Palmer kept slot car racing alive for a long time.
Yeah.
But in 1986, the guy that I built that car for, and a partner of his opened a hobby store, completely new hobby store.
So you opened a hobby store, Pretoria,
in Johannesburg. And we sold radio control planes, helicopters, cars.
How much money did you lose?
I lost a lot. Yeah. If you want to make a big fortune out of hobbies, you start with if you want to make a small fortune, you start with a big fortune. Yeah. But by then I was into radio control as well as slot cars.
Okay.
So I was running.
That's why you got involved with
I was running both, and I got involved in both. And I actually worked in the store for a year behind the counter selling and doing all the ordering and so on.
And that's 93, 94,
That
95.
was 86, 87.
Okay.
And then I went back into engineering, and I
No, hold on. The Hobby Star was like a full-time thing for you?
for a year.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yep, a
Oh,
whole
God.
year, in
That's
which I remortgaged my house.
Oh,
I was single, so it wasn't too much of a problem.
Oh.
Right, sold my car, remortgaged my house, ran up my overdraft with
Everybody
the bank.
was happy. Everybody was happy.
Everybody was happy.
Okay.
So, yeah.
The bank was happy.
Well, the bank wasn't that happy, but everybody was happy. And I had more toys than you could shake a stick at. I mean, I had a helicopter,
God,
radio-controlled
dude.
helicopter. I had radio-controlled
You
cars,
cannot
on-road, off-road,
consume your own
electric,
drugs.
gas.
Oh no.
If I was in my garage over a weekend with the door open, the kids in the neighborhood would come and look
What's
at
going
all the
on?
stuff that was hanging. Hey, is this a hobby shop here? No.
That's my second hobby shop.
Yeah, this is my second hobby shop. And then in 1989, I stopped racing slot cars altogether.
99,
89.
89.
I stopped because I picked up a sponsor for 1/8 scale radio control.
Okay.
And I decided that I couldn't divide my attention anymore.
No,
So I
no,
stopped
with
all
the
the
sponsor. Now
national-
you're a pro.
Yeah, I stopped all the national slot car racing, everything, sold all my stuff, and I went 100% into radio control. And I was 100% into radio control until we left South Africa to come to the US. And that was in 1998. So there's this big gap in my slot car history, right, between the
Radio
end of
control.
89 and the begin and like 2004. Because when I came to the US, I brought some of my radio control stuff with me, and then I bought new and I started racing radio control again.
No, it's called marriage.
Oh, well, the marriage was in, the marriages were in between that. But fortunately for me, my wife knew about my cars before she agreed to marry me.
Are you okay
So
with that? Are you okay with that? This is a big room. I know. Are you
She
okay with
is.
that?
She is.
We still
she
have
has
a-
been wonderfully supportive of me.
You still have a
over
big
all
room
the
at your
years.
house just for slot cars. The whole patio is
Oh yes, my patio has my the side patio has my
Side
track.
patio,
Yes,
yeah.
and the garage has space for one car, and the rest is workshop.
I never saw a car over there.
Oh yeah, where
The space is there, but
where
you never
guys,
use it.
Where you guys pitted when you were visiting me, that's where the car stands.
Okay.
My car stands there every night,
Oh, all right.
except when her car is in there to charge.
Okay.
Right, then my car stands out. But it's one car at a time in that
One car
garage
at a
now.
time. I remember the day, and I think I never told you that. When I was kind of restarting. I have those gaps on my slot car career, let's say this way. And I remember coming here to the West, and I was trying. Okay, let's try slot cars again because may be a good way to train my English or get some
Mhm.
people around and have more speaking time. And then I started doing it slowly, and then okay, I should go to Buena Park because over there is the ones that I know to do, the 124 scale, scratch build stuff. And I remember that I was just trying to. My mom sent my tools from Brazil, and I was just trying to figure out stuff. And I was just started to meeting you guys. And I remember that I got an email from you saying, "Look, we're gonna have a race here." And I felt like so included with that email. I was so proud
nice.
about that. It's like,
That's
oh my
cool.
God, they're going to be
Yeah.
on this little club. They race like once a year or twice a year at Dennis' house. And they're going to be involved with those guys. I was very happy about that.
Well, that's nice.
Yeah,
I'm
and I
pleased
remember-
pleased to hear that, because I seem to remember either meeting you at Buena Park or somebody from maybe Eddie or one of the other guys saying, "Hey, there's this guy Marco, and he's interested.
Yeah.
The next time you have a race." And I thought, well, let's do it, because now the story that leads up to that track, right, was after I stopped racing radio control in 2004.
Okay.
I stopped because it was getting too time-consuming and too expensive, and I was traveling so much, and so I did nothing for a while. And then I started seeing all these new fly slot cars that were all so pretty, so
Yeah.
beautiful, and I bought a couple just to put on the shelf, right? And then I built a 2-lane Carrera track that hoisted up into the roof of that garage right? And I had that there until we went to Colorado for a year, took it with me, sold it when we were there. When I came back, my wife said, "Why don't you use the the patio along the side of the house
Yeah.
for a track. I said, "You sure?" Yeah.
Sure.
Build
Can you sign here, please?
So I
Can you put it on paper?
designed and built that track, and I built every single piece of it myself, right? And at the time, when we were in Colorado, I had been a member of 2 slot car clubs in Colorado, and they had very nice rules, because I raced with Far Out for a while here before I went to Colorado, and as much as I like Stephen and enjoy some of those races, I can't do it all the time.
Yeah.
It's
a bit far for you.
from Irvine
Orange
to Glendale on a Saturday morning, 2 hours sometimes, and 2 hours home again.
To return is 2 hours. Yeah.
Right. So that was one of the issues. The other issue is I like to fiddle with cars,
Yeah.
and
Far Out is
that is very restricted in their rule sets.
Yeah.
And I ran foul of Stephen and Renee once or twice with that. However, they're still good friends. So he's a great guy, and I really loved the interview. I looked at that to practice for this,
like you need it.
So then I built a track, and I said to my wife, I'm going to just build this track, and I'm going to every now and then I'm just going to have people over, and we're going to have very simple rules, and we're not going to be racing for prizes or anything. It's just going to be for fun. And we managed to do that for a long time. And I brought in a lot of new people.
Yeah.
You came along.
Yeah.
A lot of the retro racing guys
Yeah.
from Buena Park, Barney Pointer, Craig Correa, Eddie,
Mark
Franco, Gary Donahoe, Mil Conroy, Phil Nyland, Jay Henry, even Brian Womack's been there a couple of times. John Torrey Anderson's been there a couple of times. Oscar was there. John Sucres was there one time. So all of this, I'm actually going to make a memorial plaque with the names of those people who've raced there that are no longer with us, just so that we remember all of these guys. There's quite a few of them. Yeah. Terry De Los Santos, who was a member of Far Out. Jay, John, Oscar.
I never met Oscar.
Quite a few. So yeah, that's where that started. And of course, I used to do that quite often until the COVID thing came along.
Yeah.
And that has kind of put a stop to it, but I'll get it going again.
Yeah, it was a very nice day. And I remember going there and just like a kid in the candy store, like, what the hell is going on here? He has everything set up for cutting, for soldering, and I remember that I was trying to build, restarting to build my chassis, and I was trying to go to the hard body with Keith Tanaka's hard body program, which is, I think it's one of the best programs we have here, because we have so much room for innovation, and I was trying to put together a chassis, and I was having problem with oxidation. I couldn't have like a clean
joint.
Yeah, no, the soldering was not my problem, but the final product was never kind of clean, like. And then you show me the tumbler.
The tumbler.
Oh my God!
I remember because you ordered it on your way home.
I ordered on my way home on the stop signs. This is a good price. And then I stop at the next. How much is it? And then when I see, I was literally looking for my credit card and my stop sign.
I remember that day very well. I loaned you a slotted Nissan R89.
Yeah, for the race.
Wow,
yeah,
what a wonderful car.
Yeah, I like that car. Well, we're racing 132nd slotted cars, but we're talking about the scratch builds. And I remember that they kind of changed it, because then I started to say, okay, now I can build something that I can be proud about it. And I've been building very cool stuff, and people were asking for me to be. I don't have the time anymore, but it was pretty cool to that tool, and that day kind of changed my perception about it.
Yeah, and how all of that started was, I was racing a little bit at Buena Park back in early 2006, racing flexis, steel cars with Palmer motors and things like that. And we were racing Philippe's TSRF cars, and Philippe got Mike Stubbe to come and race. Again, and brought him back into the racing fold, kind of. And Stubbe built some brass scratch-built cars.
That
was the beginning of retro. And Stubbe brought a car, and everybody drove it, and I looked at it,
finally,
we can build now,
we can
something
build.
that I can build.
Yeah.
And I went home and I built a car, and a couple of other guys built cars, and then we started to race them. And then Paul Sterrett came to me one day and said, we're going to set up an organization for this,
Okay.
and I want you to help me. And I said, Paul, I don't want to be part of
Any
any
political or
organizations.
Yeah.
I mean, in South Africa, I had been the chairman of the South African Radio Drivers Association for radio control cars for 5 years or something or longer. I had been on the South African Model Car Association for slot car racing. I had written rules. I had written constitutions. I had been involved in all kinds of stuff. When I came here in radio control, I got involved again in a club committee and then on the RAW Executive Committee, the National Committee for Radio Control, and I was burned out of
well,
politics, commercial influence, all of those things.
I understand.
So I said to Paul, I'll tell you what, I'm not going to get involved with this organization. I will write the rules for you. So the very first set of rules for Retro Can-Am and Retro Formula One came from my computer. And that's where it all started in 2006. I still have the first
That's
the
very
first Formula One that I built. It's been hanging on the wall, so it's looking a little bad, but they haven't changed much.
Samson Classics. No, they haven't changed much. And I bet you if you clean it up, put new bearings.
Oh, I'm sure if I cleaned it up, it would
It'll
still
be
be
working.
okay. It was never a great car, but it was fun.
Let me show you here. There we go. So this is based on the turbine car, I believe.
Yes, the Lotus 56 turbine.
Yeah, turbine.
And in those days, we were using TSR motors. So the lettering on the front says Lotus TSR Bine. If you look on the nose, it says Lotus TSR Bine rather than turbine.
There we go. Very nice. And you have like Grand Hill
Yep,
helmet on it.
Graham Hill helmet. By then I had been building quite a lot again, because as soon as I got back into slot car racing here in 2004 or so, the very first thing I did was to try and find stuff to build. And I bought a couple of, I started with a Carrera set, got some extra track, and then I bought some fly cars and a couple more fly cars, and then I started building. And that's the first
Very
one that I
first one.
built when I came back. And the interesting thing is to see how similar it is to what I was building in South Africa years before, and how wrong it was completely for the new style of racing.
But that's looks like a slotted body, but it's not a slotted body, right?
That is a Victor Ferguson true scale
Okay.
vacuum formed PETG body, and the decals and the lettering are all computer generated by me.
Okay.
I sat on hundreds of flights back and forward across the country with my laptop on my lap and Photoshop,
Okay.
and pixel by pixel I built up the graphics for those.
Find the S001.
S0. I decided when I came back to racing and I started building again, I'm going to number everything. And I have a spreadsheet.
I know about the spreadsheet.
There are many spreadsheets.
Okay, but I know
that
about the one,
particular
the big one.
spreadsheet has every chassis that I've ever built, from the first one to what is now the last one.
That's the last
This
one.
is the latest one. That is number 895.
895. Come on.
Since early 2004. So that's 18 years, nearly 900 chassis.
There we go. And that's the colors that you use to
Oh,
race.
yeah.
For a can
And that
for
also
everything.
has a link back to my radio control racing days. The
I
blue-
just
the blue
finished
and silver.
my 7th one.
7th one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good pace.
That's good.
Right.
Well, if your cars are as good as they are after 7, you're going to do well. Because it took me hundreds before I was in.
Yeah, I know. But I remember coming out of their house and literally ordering the tumbler on my way back
Mhm.
home, and that kind of changed my game. And I really wanted to say thank you for that day,
Well, that's good. And
because after that was several wins and new cars and even the Checkpoint Cup after that.
mhm.
So that was pretty cool.
And it's always been, the building has always been my real passion. I always tell people I race so that I can build, not I build so that I can race.
I kind of feel the same way. It's for me today, it's hard to find time and not only time, but a free time that you can really enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I see there's a racing coming and I promise to go to attend, and then I need to just figure out a way to put it together, and it's not that enjoyable.
All right, or else I say, nah, I don't want to race today. I'd rather be in the garage building
Something.
Yeah, that happens too. I'm having to slow down on the building nowadays because my fingers are not as good as they used to be. It's not as easy as it was, but I'm still building now.
But if someone wants a chassis from you,
right now, I put off as many as I possibly can because, and certainly, put it this way, I got into a situation at one stage where people were asking me to build them chassis or to build them complete cars so that they could enter a proxy race.
Okay.
Right now, proxy races, as you know, is something where you take the car and you send it off, and it's really a test of how well you can build a car to run on all kinds of other people's tracks without you driving it. And to me, to get somebody else to build you the car and then you enter it in a proxy just didn't feel quite right, you know.
Yeah, but you kind of enjoyed those proxy races. I remember going to your house
and
and
had
like
building
boxes.
my own cars for proxies, yes.
But it's kind of fun to get a box with 50 cars to try out.
And running those races, I've done a lot of them even after I stopped building for my own cars for proxies.
Yeah.
And running a proxy race at my house is a lot of fun, and I never have a problem in getting enough people because everybody wants to be there.
Yeah, I went there once.
The sheer idea of being able to stand there and drive 20 other guys' cars one after the other and enjoy that kind of racing. And the nice part about that is how each guy coaches the other guy as the cars rotate through the drive, because the drivers stay the same and the cars rotate through. So this guy will say, hey, Phil will say, hey, Gary, watch that car, it's got no brakes. Or, hey, Phil, Mill.
But even though when you send it off, you send with notes too, right? Something
yes,
needs to be
usually
repaired.
The way that the proxies are done, they like that. On the various internet forums where those proxies are organized and covered.
That's deep web for me. I never got into that. Like the way that the blogs work, like for me, is just like sometimes I'm talking to Eddie and Eddie wants to race something, saying, "Oh, can you just find it for me because I cannot find the rules or the dates or anything." And he goes, "Here's the link." It's so easy for some of you guys. For me, it's just like deep web. It would be easy for me to buy drugs than find out about those things.
But I wouldn't know where to buy drugs.
Well.
And because I'm not interested.
Yeah, just because your wife is watching.
I've always been that kind of person. I always want to do the research. I research and research and research, right?
Yeah.
And
he's laughing because he knows where to buy drugs.
Oh, he does? Okay.
Yeah. It's easy for him.
Oh, I can buy weed. I know where to buy weed. I have an account at the dispensary.
Well, now it's legal.
Not that I use it, but because it's legal.
Yeah. What about Pretoria 1965? Did you know where to buy weed?
No, I knew about weed, but I didn't know.
Was easier to get a pink PSC gear than
It was easier to get a pink PSC gear than it was to get weed. If you knew where to go, you could buy it. You could buy little, I don't know if here they use matchbooks. They don't have a matchbox.
Okay.
But in South Africa, you had a matchbox. It was a little box that slid open and it had all these matches in it, right?
Yeah.
And you could buy weed.
They don't have
a matchbox full at a time.
Right? I'm more impressive that they never had a matchbox here. They don't have matchbox here in the United States. It's just like the folding stuff.
It's usually all I've ever seen are the folding ones. Maybe you get them, but sometimes they're bigger. But ours were little. I mean,
it was a little one with a little sliding box. That's what they have in Brazil. They don't have it here.
Lion matches, not that I know of. But then I don't smoke, so I don't.
Since we changed the subject, another thing is, I remember that in movies, people get a match and just lit anywhere.
Oh yeah, they would strike it on anything. Yes. Yeah.
How did it happen? Like it never.
Well, the early technology for that phosphorus blend or whatever that was on the edge of that just needed
scratch,
any kind of impact, and it would.
I spent my whole childhood trying to lit a match with that, and I couldn't never done.
You could do it with safety. That's why they called them safety matches. the later ones.
Oh, come on.
Yeah.
Why?
Because you couldn't strike them just on anything. You had to strike them against that little
That was a good
piece
move. That
along
was
the
a
side.
power move, and you just have a
Yeah,
little
that's cool.
fire here.
Yeah.
So just come back to proxy, Carlos.
Okay.
Proxy, as far as I understand, is that you build a car, you send to someone with money, and you hope to see your car one day back. And then somebody just picks up like 50 cars, put it in a box, and send it over to people who has tracks. And
Yep.
they have to run like several laps with each car and write a report and send back to the next one.
Yeah.
So the first day that I knew about it was at Dennis' house, and he has literally like a big box because they have to ship it back and forth in the same box.
Yeah.
And like literally 50 cars aligned, like completely different from each other. And they have to run a race.
Yep. And so you have 3 drivers, or I try to use 6
Yeah.
because I'll run each car twice on each lane
Yeah.
because I have 3 lanes on
It's
the
a
track.
3-lane, yeah.
So you'd have 3 drivers, and the drivers stay on the lane, and then you rotate the cars through the driver. So every driver drives every car, right? And it takes a bit of organizing, but I've got the system down pretty cool.
Who decides when it's over? Like, okay, we run 10 tracks with those cars.
That is usually agreed right at the beginning.
Okay. So you
by
know.
somebody will come up with an idea, and usually it's an idea we're going to run.
Trans Am cars, yeah.
We're going to run Trans Am cars.
Okay.
We're going to run Ford versus Ferrari.
Okay.
We're going to run early SCCA.
And then there's a basic set of rules, like
and then
20K motors.
they'll say, this is the rules we want. And then everybody will say, okay, what about this? What about that? And then you'll get to a point where the rules are accepted, set up, and everybody's happy. And then you say, okay, how long do you need to build the cars? And you take time to build the cars, and then they all get sent to one place. Tech inspection, sometimes penalties if the cars are out of the are not part of the rules.
What kind of penalties? Monetary?
Points or laps.
So it is a full championship.
Yes.
So
And
by
then
then,
they'll say, okay, at the beginning, we'll say, okay, this is 10 races. Here are the points, the way they're going to score. You're going to count your 9 best. And the races are going to be at this track, this track, this track. You know, we're going to start in Vancouver, and then we're going to go to Washington, and then we're going to Oregon, and then we're going to California.
so this guy is figuring out how much will be each shipment of those boxes, and the shipment for your car back to you.
Yep.
So
And that's all part of your entry fee. That's really what your entry fee is for,
okay for the further
to
shipment.
cover the shipping. And then some of the
How much was the last one that you?
$30, I think.
Plus the car, and you see the car again, right?
Oh yeah, sure. Some of my cars took a year to come back, right?
They just traveled.
No, they went from here
Yeah.
to
Canada.
Tasmania,
Jesus.
to Australia, back to the
What about
back
customs?
to the US,
They don't pay.
to the UK, back to the US, and then to me. Took a year before I got the car back.
And came back in one piece.
Sort of.
Sort of.
Yeah. I've kept it the way it was.
What about customs? Who's paying?
Sometimes we've been caught with customs, but usually if you declare, there's usually on the box or just inside the box is a big thing that says, you know, these cars belong to these people and they are being sent around the world and so on. And generally we
Imagine
get
the
away
guy.
with that.
Imagine the guy at the post office reading this. Oh God, again?
Again,
Oh man, just let it go.
the biggest problem we have is in and out of Canada, believe it or not.
Yeah, I believe.
Anyway, so that's proxy racing.
Do you have any of your cars out right now?
No.
You get it all together.
No, we
COVID,
ran.
COVID kind of messed it up. COVID kind of messed it up with that too.
COVID
right?
actually messed it up. Not so much, it would have been great because everybody was at home, they could build cars.
Yeah.
But the problem was you couldn't get people together to race
get
them.
to race, yeah.
So that was the problem. So COVID did mess that. We ran a series of proxies for Group 5 cars, and I won the first one, and I came second in the second one.
How many cars involved?
The first year there were just a few, like 10 or 12.
Okay.
The second year, when
Still
I came
fun.
in second, I entered the same car again, and there were maybe 20 the second year. The third year, I entered a new car, and I won it again. And
But
then
it's kind of a mix
25s.
because I see brass chassis. I see
It
like
depends on the
plastic.
rules, right?
Okay.
Sometimes the rules will allow brass and steel and any kind of chassis,
Should-
along with the plastic chassis.
Should we enter an electric dreams car on those proxies?
good.
Let's do it.
Sometimes the rules are plastic only. Sometimes it's a one-make proxy, which I don't, doesn't really appeal to me.
Yeah.
Somebody will run a Revo slot proxy. It means everybody takes their Revo slot, tunes it up, and sends it in. And I'm thinking, why?
Yeah, there's nothing to do there.
To me, the important or the attractive proxies were always number one, where I can build.
Yeah.
Number two, where the theme attracts me.
Yeah, because you it's your limitation over there.
I don't want to be involved in a Formula One proxy. It doesn't feel to me right. Although I did a couple because they were 1960 1.5 liter proxies, so they had skinny little tires. They were lovely.
They were lovely, yeah.
Anyway,
it's pretty interesting. Yeah, that's a universe that I don't know nothing about it. Thank you for bringing me information. But yeah, we should do electric dreams, whatever. If you find out about something, let's put together a car and send it out.
Sure.
Yeah. Do they get to Spain or no? To Spain, Italy, or just like?
I haven't seen much. There are a couple of proxies that have run in places in Europe.
Because that's another thing that is,
and I think in Italy maybe.
Depending on the track surfaces, it's very hard to set up one car for several tracks.
Absolutely.
So you kind of need to be in the middle.
And a lot of the proxies that I entered was a mixture of wood and plastic, or a mixture of wood and plastic where the wood tracks, some had braid, some had tape. So the positioning of your guide in front of the car is almost impossible. You have to
tires
I used to use an isofulcrum design like the old cucarachas, so that it would at least compensate
have like
a little.
tongue guide coming on.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, it was fun.
So I interrupt you when you're talking about the beginning of the D3 and Stubi and this kind of stuff that you wrote the rules, and then you got involved again full time when they changed the stamped chassis to scratch build ones.
Well, that became I wrote those rules, and that became what we now know as retro.
Okay.
And we started in Southern California.
Supposed to call D3 or something, and then you got its plates.
Right in the very beginning, it was called Nostalgia Can-Am. That's the name at the top of the first rule sheet.
Okay.
At the end of 2006, Paul Sterrett, who was racing with us at Buena Park, came to the guys and said, "Guys, I want to take this group and associate them with the USRA and create a new division of the USRA, Division 3 of the USRA. Division 1 is wing cars. Division 2 is the so-called scale stuff with the steel cars. I want to create a Division 3 for retro cars. And then we'll be part of that whole group of people, and it has advantages for us." And at the time, the perception of the USRA by the locals was very poor. And most of the guys said, if you're going to do that, we're out. We don't want anything to do with the USRA.
And who was running USRA?
I don't remember who was running it at the time.
Were they running something similar to you guys with retros or no?
No. Retro USRA was Division 1 for wing cars, Division 2 for steel cars. There was nothing else. So Paul was wanting to create this new division within the USRA structure. And people said, we don't want anything to do that. We want to race here. So as a compensation to Paul, they called it D3. And that was the set of rules that Southern California started racing.
Like a third division of USRA.
It would have been, but it wasn't, right? So it wasn't called Division 3, it was called D3.
Finally, I figure out why it's D3.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so they started racing that here. Then, as all that racing started, Philippe de L'Espinay was doing a pretty good job on the internet, on Slotblog and other places, of promoting this retro racing. Lots of race reports, all of the information, photographs, etc., going out. And it started creating interest in other parts of the country. And Joe Neumeister, Noose, in New Jersey, tells the story about how his phone rang one day and he picked it up, and it was John Gorski on the other end saying, "We're back." And East Coast Retro started with those two guys, Gorski, Neumeister, and Tony P.
Yeah.
They started that.
Yeah.
And they decided to use slightly different rules to what we were using here. And At the same time, there was a little bit of scratch-built Formula One racing happening in Chicago.
Okay,
At Mike Swiss's,
Swiss, yeah.
and also the rules were a little different there.
Mike Swiss, and was he associated with Roger at the time or no?
This was after he and Roger had already parted ways.
Okay. And Mike Swiss was associated with Cofford, right?
Mike Swiss used to work for Cofford
Okay.
in earlier times.
I think he still has the original Blue King from Cofford.
No, the track that Mike Swiss has, he built himself.
Okay.
And I think Roger helped him build that track.
Okay.
Right, and then it was after that they parted ways. Anyhow, so early in 2007, these other little pieces of this start getting together, and by October of 2007, there was enough interest going around that Mike Swiss said, I'm going to run a big race for retro at my track in Chicago, and I'm going to call it the Sano. And this word Sano comes from
Japan.
No, it comes from Mike Stubbe and the surfing guys.
Oh.
It's a shortened word for sanitary or it means pretty, clean and pretty. It's Sano. Ooh, that's Sano, dude.
Got it.
It's a surfing slang.
I thought it was associated with the Japan scene.
It's a surfing slang that Stubbe started using, and then it found its way into slot cars. So Mike set up this very first race, and he set up
that Blue King.
on his king track and
went-
his flat track. He has a flat track that he built and a king that he
Is
built.
the flat track the same that they still has?
Yes, and the king's the same as they
That's
still.
a weird in a good way track.
It's a weird in a good way track.
It's
Yes,
flat.
absolutely.
It's flat and there's no
Completely.
bridge.
No, nothing.
And it's big.
Yeah, it's big and it's flat and it's fast.
I drove
And nowadays they don't put the wiggles in because there's a section of that track that rotates, and it has a set of wiggles in it, a set of S's, right? But nobody wants to drive
I
it.
didn't
I
know
loved
that.
it.
I
But
didn't know that.
Nobody wants to drive it, so he has it always rotated the other way.
I didn't
Yeah.
notice. I went there, I didn't know.
Anyway, so he sets up this race with his rules. And everybody who was racing retro around the country started converging on Chicago for that race in there. I was living in Denver at the time. I flew in from Denver. The guys from the East Coast came in. The guys from the Chicago area were there. The guys from Michigan were there. Some of the guys from the South were there. There were all kinds and conditions of people there.
So the retro went to the East Coast like 2 years after they started to be here?
Not even two, maybe 8 or 9 months.
So the We're Back call from Gorski was like...
Was early in 2007.
Okay, so very early.
Yeah.
And then we have...
And then it spread like wildfire everywhere, right? So
and then we already have people doing bodies, and Ferguson was doing the
bodies was a problem in the beginning.
Mhm.
There were still some Palmer MAC bodies available, and Victor started making bodies, and Ron Hirschman started back pouring some of those and making bodies. So in the beginning, the body thing was a bit of a problem.
Yeah, because
in terms
Parma's
of
was
supply.
out of the picture, right? And JK was not that strong.
JK had one or two that were usable there. TI-22, for example, was
Okay.
one of the ones that was used for a long time. We down here used to use Victor's bodies. We used to use Toytech bodies from what's his name up in Santa Maria.
I don't know.
I'll think of his name in a minute.
Well, when we forget about names here, we call people Greg. You can call him Greg.
Okay. Yeah. So we all got together in Denver, in Chicago.
Okay, was Greg there?
Greg Wells was Greg Wells was there.
Another
Yes.
Greg, all
Greg
right.
Wells was there.
Okay.
And we had this little meeting. We stood outside in the rain, outside Swiss's raceway.
Uh-huh.
Ron Hirschman, myself, Joe Newmeister, Greg Wells.
Is Greg Wells the one that does slot
Greg
block?
Wells is the owner and administrator of
Slot
Slot
Block,
Block.
yeah.
Yes. I'm trying to think who the fifth. There was another one, and I can't think of who it was at this point. It
Can I
wasn't
interrupt
Tony.
you for a second? I like Greg Wells very much. He helped us a lot. He helped me a lot when I was trying to produce races and stuff like that. But one day, I was working on Roger Moom's collections from Misak. and I found the motor from the 50s or 60s, maybe early, late 60s, maybe. Call it the Bonner motor.
Yes, the Bonner.
The Bonner, right? So I found that funny, and I took a picture and posted on Slot blog. Have you ever raced with a Bonner? It was just a joke. So Greg Wells...
I know exactly what's going to happen here.
Yeah, so Greg Wells went there, thought it was my lack of English, and just, have you ever raced with a motor named Bonner? And fixed my title and just ruined my joke. And then suddenly there's like 20 people commenting, oh yes, those were populars in the 60s. Like only serious comments, nobody got my joke. It's just like, oh God. I tried to delete it, I couldn't, and the thing just stayed there forever. It's still there if you find it.
My guide nuts, which are called Harry's nuts.
Hairy nuts.
I had the same problem.
Yeah, but come on, hairy nuts. I thought it was a joke. I asked you
Yeah,
for
of course it was a joke.
Okay.
It always was a joke, but he didn't like that.
He didn't like that?
No. Harry's nuts. Harry's guide nuts.
Oh God. So
whatever. Anyway,
he makes
you
a
need to
guide
edit
joke.
this out, right?
He makes a guide net that is like a specific way to put it together, like 2 pins. Very nice. I use it, and it was based on a guy named Harry, right?
A friend of mine called Harry was the guy
South Africa,
that
right?
first made the very first ones like that.
So he
So we
promotes
called them
it
Harry's nuts, right?
Harry's nuts,
Right?
like hairy nuts,
So when I
which is okay.
there's a number of levels there.
Yeah.
Number of levels
I
there.
never raced with a hairy nut or Bonner motor. With
Yeah.
a Bonner.
Anyway, so we were all there in Chicago, and we got together and decided we were going to form one organization for retro,
Okay.
and we're going to pull everybody's rules together.
Yeah.
And Joe Newmeister had done a lot of work ahead of time, and he arrived with a spreadsheet that said, okay, the retro East Coast retro rules, Rocky Mountain rules, which was the
Denver.
series that in Denver that I started when I moved there. Chicago rules, D3 rules, so on and so on. All of these different rules, showing where the differences were and how we could get around them and so on. And I said to the guys at the time, I said, listen, there's nobody here from Southern California. You guys must get hold of
Yeah, because those are the guys
those
that
guys in
started.
Southern California, pull them into this thing so that we get one organization.
Yeah. Never
And
happened.
What happened was
Still trying.
they, instead of saying, hey, what do you guys think about this and how do you think we should do this?
Yeah. Unified.
Joe said, this is what we're going to do. Do you want to join us? And sent them the rules in which the Pro Slot Puppy Dog was the motor of choice,
Okay.
and that killed it. Because Philippe was completely, totally against any kind of unsealed motor or workable motor
Oh, I can understand.
in that class. And Mike Stubbe, as one of the originators, had no real opinion about motors because he had never been a motor man.
Okay.
Right? He was always the chassis guy.
kinda-
His
kinda-
father built the motors.
When Philippe brought those sealed motors from China, it kind of revolutionized everything for us. We're
Yeah, but
still running
remember
those.
that when he bought those motors from China, Todd Radke had already brought the Falcon 7s from China.
Okay. So those both of those guys.
Todd
kinda-
Radke was the
kinda
guy who
changed.
really changed it because he brought in the original Falcons.
The ones with the yellow seal.
Yes. The early ones, the Falcon ones that rotated in the wrong direction,
Yeah.
and then the Falcon 2s that fixed that, and then others after that, Falcon 5 and then Falcon 7.
Basically, those guys look to the West Coast. Look, we need to use those this kind of motors because you have room to prepare, you have room to open the end bell and stuff.
Well, originally, the puppy dog motors were sealed. They're sealed when they come from ProSlot.
Yeah.
And there were 2 or 3
Were those
refurbishers were appointed.
16D motors?
No, they're the little ones, the 4002s, the Euro Mark 1 motor or whatever Dan called it. That fits in the 132nd scale car.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And originally, there were just a couple of approved people who were allowed to open them and refurbish them and send them back. ProSlot themselves and Ron Hirschman.
Okay.
And that caused all kinds of issues at the time because he was on the board of the IRA. And it was his idea to call it the IRRA.
Okay.
International Retro Racing Association. And I said at the time, why? You know, US Retro Racing Association would be nice. Oh, no, but this thing's going to get big. Well, it did.
It got to Japan.
It got to the UK. It got to Japan. There's a little bit of racing in Australia.
Yeah.
There's some racing in other parts of Europe, a little bit. But that whole genre of stuff that's now 20 years old.
Looking at this right now, don't you think that people are kind of a little bit, how can I tell you, selfish about creating that rule? Because I understand that people are eager to start to build their own chassis and start to work with brass again and make like something that was so much fun in the 60s and 70s. But at the same time, you don't bring new people into it. It's very hard to bring new people into it because, first of all, or you find somebody like Dennis to build your car, or you need so much involvement to get a car at least at the same pace of a B-main racer, right?
And I think originally, the original idea when Mike Stubbe and Paul and I and a couple of other guys started, we didn't think about anything more than just building some cars to race against our mates, right? That was the idea. Let's build some cars and race with some friends. And we weren't trying to necessarily recreate the cars. We were trying to recreate the time where people would go to a race and you'd find out that your car was no damn good, and you go back to your hotel and you drill holes in the table in the hotel to make a jig, and you build another chassis on the table in the hotel and take it back to the raceway the next morning and see whether it worked better. And that's what those guys were doing. Stubbe, Warmack, Sucres, Pete Zimmerman, Terry Schmidt, Tori Anderson, Tony P., Jerry Brady, Pete Van Arens, all of those guys that were around, all the big names from that era, the 66, 67 to 70, that time. And that was what we were trying to recreate, that building thing.
And how do you believe that the scene for the retro racing is today?
I'm worried that it's coming to its end. Certainly in Southern California, it doesn't look very healthy at the moment. Yeah. We get a couple of good races in a year, but on a regular basis, we're only getting, single figures and maybe 10s and 12s. But that's it.
I remember when I joined, I was just trying to figure out, because I thought it was fun, and it was a little bit similar to what I was doing in Brazil in my teenage years. That's why I'm enjoying. Like, okay, I can build something, I can test something, I kind of know what I need to do to make it faster. So that was my goal, to go there. And I remember that the very first race that I went there was, Eddie gave me a car. It was like a Sano car. Not Sano, from...
Camo
car, yeah. It's very nice chassis, like looks like Batman or something.
I have one of those.
Yeah.
Spider.
And he gave it to me. It was like a used car, and I could like put my skills and make it race, and it was kind of a Western something. But I went there on the day. Like, I went there I fixed the car the night before. I went there to race. I think I was like a C main or something, like maybe D. It was fun. It was like a big group of people. We stayed there the whole day. It was like over 50 racers. And then I got involved with that. Okay, that's cool. Let's see what those guys are really racing. So I saw that there were new chassis cuts. Somebody pointed me to Brian. So this is the guy who's cutting those chassis. Just talk to him. And Brian was very welcoming. And then when's the next big race? Because I couldn't go to the monthly races, which is something that is hurting right now because we have so much a small grid on those monthly races, and then just a bigger one on the big events. And then the next one was the Checkpoint Cup. And I said, okay, let's do this challenge. So I got prepared, and it was a good run for me. But again, that time was 2019, 3 years ago. Of course, we have COVID and everything, but we have like on the one that I won, it was like 48 people. So the last one was 24, 26.
One of the things that's happened, I think, over the years is that when we started this thing, the tracks we were running on then and the tracks we're running on now are not the same.
Yes.
The king tracks particularly have gotten faster and faster and faster
Because they're developed for other classes.
because they're developed for other classes, and the tracks are too fast for these cars
And why you're racing on those tracks?
because nobody wants to race on flat tracks for whatever reason.
No, I mean the
People
Buena.
are lazy.
What is wrong with the Buena Park King track?
Even the Buena Park King track is a horsepower track now. Always has been. Because that's a girding track,
Yeah.
right? Now, the original track, the original King track that was in Buena Park was,
Okay.
I think, an Ogilvy.
Mm-hmm.
And we were running 4.3 second laps
Okay.
with a TSR motor on that track.
That's 10 years ago, probably 15 years ago, probably.
2006, yeah,
Okay.
or 2007. 2007 it would
Which
have
was a good time for 3.
been. Yeah, it was.
And now people are doing 3.6s on Piranha's
On the
Raceway
tra-
track.
and it's crazy. And the problem is that's what's led to the reduction in the numbers
Yeah.
because of the escalation in cost of trying to find motors that go,
Yeah.
tires that work, and putting in the time in the chassis and
Yes.
putting in the time on
True.
the track to get everything tuned to the nth degree. Right.
Well, that's part of the
Soon as
hobby.
you-
Like my take on those, and that's why I'm not that active. And if I have any more to talk about it, because I got into the train was running, and I got out, and the train's still running. So, but I won a couple races, and I won an important one.
Mhm.
And I really don't understand why we changed the venue. I think even because Buena Park, even with Buena Park changing hands so many times through the years, I think as racers we should respect the place and we should like be grateful that place is there.
Mhm.
I understand the political point of view and I understand everything that Richard is doing. Richard Cornut is doing with his incredible facility at Piranha Raceway. But for me to change the venue without any notice, without consulting anybody, was just like a political thing or a commercial thing, was kind of harsh for me. And the first year that they changed was we had the COVID, nobody raced. The second year we still had the COVID and they still went there and did the race for 20 people. And that kind of hurts the event itself.
Oh yeah, sure.
Like we have 4 big events. We have the Checkpoint Cup, which is the biggest.
Yeah.
We have the Peter Zimmerman, now
Yep.
it's Zimmerman Sucrose race. We have the Bula Bash,
Yep.
which is happening. We're going to race together,
Mhm.
actually.
Oh, we have the
Euro-
Western States and then the Bula Bash.
Yes, the Western States and then the Bula Bash. So we have those 4. All of those were held at Buena Park. And now they change hands without ever consulting anybody. So
Mhm.
there is no association. There is no people taking rules. It's just because the place is shinier and the track is faster. Let's go there. So this kind of a lack of respect, this kind
Yeah.
of bums me out. I have nothing against what Richard is doing. But how can you change a venue in a venue that's so important? I don't know Robert, the new owner. I spoke with him like a couple of times. But how can you lose that? And I tell you why. And I tell you how. And we run a raceway. We kind of run a raceway here at the Electric Trains because we have our own race program. But our racing program is not in the hands of the racers. We are controlling it. So you cannot have a new track opening here in the car and say, "Oh yeah, the Slot.it National is going to be here now."
That's an important point. And the history of racing at Buena Park was always that the owner provided the facility
Yeah,
and the racers provided the organization.
they still like that. Even the drag racers, right?
Yes.
They don't put a hand on anything.
And that's why, partly why,
It was so
it
easy to
moved.
take it off. Yeah.
because the racers were in charge. And unfortunately, there were, I mean, there've been personality issues there often. Some of the,
Yeah,
I think we were
for
fine
me,
when-
for me, it really bums me out because I really don't have the time to go to a new track that is designed for wing cars or super fast cars to try to rebuild my retro car to go to that track, and I think it got too fast too.
I have to agree with you. This I can't say anything else. I don't run any retros on the. I haven't run retros on a King track, other than the big 4 races. I never run any other King track retro racing.
So can you imagine?
Whether it was Buena Park or Piranha,
Mm.
I don't do it, right? Because it's a horsepower problem. I like to race where the horsepower is taken out of the equation.
Okay.
and that means
Yeah.
flat tracks.
That's another problem. Like, I don't know if the new modern cars, the Mike Swiss motor or the Mid America motor, they're coming a little bit more leveled. But I remember when I started to race with you guys, you need to buy like 10, 100 motors.
The thing is, when we started,
find
and
one.
we were looking at Falcon 7s, and everybody said, "Ooh, we've got to buy 50 Falcon 7s to find a fast one. Let's use the JK Retro Hawk because it's much more consistent."
Mm-hmm.
And I said at the time,
It's the same thing.
you're going, instead of chasing a tenth of a second, you're now going to be chasing half a tenth of a second, and it's going to cost you the same.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened.
And now it's probably happening again.
All that happened was you're chasing the variation in a motor that gives you 4 3s. You're now chasing variation in a motor that gives you 4 2s or 4 1s. And now you're going to the Chicagoland motor or to the Retro Hawk, and you're chasing the variation that's in the 3 6 or a 3 5 motor. And all that it's done is it has lost us racers.
That's another thing.
But you can't get away.
The Checkpoint Cup, you go there and you buy 3 motors in the
Mhm.
draw. Lucky you if you get a good one. That was perfect because you have enough time to try the motors, find the one that you're going to race. Good luck with that. I was lucky in 2019. I got a bullet in my hand, and I have a very nice car. And I don't know how. I still don't know how I won that thing. Because it was literally my second race with that group. But as soon as we went to Piranha, it went with instead of 3, you can buy 10 motors. No, you can buy unlimited motors. Come on.
Slot car racing has never been good at organizing itself.
I think
And,
it's.
you
I
know,
think it's
I
just.
mean, and I'm not part of any of the organizational bodies, so all that I have is my own private opinions about this.
No, I have my private opinions about it too, and somehow we run a raceway here because as we speak, we have like 10 people on the track getting ready for the race on Saturday. Yeah,
and I wish I could have been one of them, but
but I'm here holding you.
I haven't had a chance. I've been busy with other things.
But the thing is, for retro, which is one of the coolest classes that ever appeared in the slot car racing, that you can build your chassis under limitations and rules. You can be fast. You can design stuff. I think like when you put a retro car in a Blue King track, it's just like building. I believe so. It's just like building a Indy car for the Indy 500. It needs to be perfect. Needs to be aligned. Needs to be. And then you have this whole thing. And then even if you do everything that you need to do in your part, we still have to buy 100 motors. You still have to race in a track that are not supposed to be racing retro. I'm sorry for the critique, but.
I agree, because the design of that, particularly the Piranha King track, and to an extent the sister track that's now at Port Jefferson Raceway on Long Island, those 2 tracks, and I'll add a third one to that, and that's the one in St. Martin that Reggie Coram has in St. Martin in the Caribbean.
Okay.
Those 3 tracks were the last of the 3 of the last 5 tracks that Girding built. And all of them have the same issue, and that is that the transitions from one turn to the next are too quick for these cars. Yeah. Because what they've done is they have shortened all the straightaways, and they have expanded the radius of the turns so that they stay in the same design at 155 feet. But now, because the turns are bigger, the cars go through the turns faster.
Almost flat.
And therefore, the overall lap time comes down. And that's all they've been chasing, is lap time on the King track. We want the fastest King track in the world. Yeah. And that's how they do it. And as a result of that...
Can I add one more track to this list? And you'll not believe who owns it. The last one, that's called the G10, I believe, or G12, is owned by Kanye West. Gary Girding went to Kanye West Ranch.
Who's Kanye West?
Come on, you know who's Kanye West.
No.
Kanye West, the rapper. So
Kanye West.
Kanye West. Yeah. So he went to the ranch of Kanye West.
Yeah.
And built a King track, which was the last one that he built.
Okay.
It's called the G12 or something.
No,
like
it should be. It'll be about 16 or 17 because
probably I don't know.
I think the one at Piranha is 15.
So the last one that Gary built is with Kanye West. Kanye West.
Interesting.
So is he
trying to be Elvis.
Trying to be Elvis? Cut to Cunny. He said, "Yeah, my retro car is not going very well. I need a slower track."
So I mean, that's what's happened is that those transitions are bad, and so it's a major issue. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, and then on top of that, the political game, changing the venues without consulting anybody. Again, nothing against Richard. Richard's going to be here, actually. I invited him over to talk about how crazy he is on a racetrack. But that's the kind of stuff that bums me out. It's not the...
Sure, and I think we all have our opinions about it. I mean, there's always been a number of times where there's been disruptions in amongst the people.
Yeah,
the racers. I mean, Southern California Retro Racing Association (SCRRA) was an opposition group to D3.
Yeah,
right. Because people got to the point of being tired of Paul's rules and the way that he and Keith were doing things, to the point where John Sucre said, "I want to do things differently," and people had to make a choice. And people made the choice. And that was the end of D3 as a retro organization and the beginning of D3 as a hard body organization, which has remained completely separate.
Yeah.
If at that time there had been two raceways, the chances are that people would have moved from one raceway to another, and it wouldn't have had anything to do with the raceway owner.
A raceway, yeah.
But sometimes it has to do with the raceway owner.
Yeah, but right now we have the thing divided, mostly because of the raceway.
Right now there's no real division as far as retro is concerned, because there's basically nothing happening at Buena Park. And if you talk to retro people about racing at Buena Park, apart from the little bit on the flat track, the condition of the Buena Park tracks is always the number one issue. The Buena Park tracks are not in the kind of condition that they need to be. Quite honestly, the condition of the Piranha tracks for retro racing is not always ideal either.
Yeah.
Right? Because on the King track, you've always got too much glue. On the flat track, you've never got enough glue.
Yeah. But you have your fun at the Piranha one, right? You have your fun on the flat track. I learned that you won a couple of races over there.
I run LMPs on a Thursday night, every Thursday night on the flat track at Piranha, and I love it. I'm doing well. I like the track. I can drive it. It's a challenge.
Yeah,
and
it's a big track.
I'm on my way there now to go and
Dennis, thank you again. I'm
You're
sorry
welcome.
for interrupting your day. I know that your day here is very busy. And
No problem.
in the name of the corporation, has been almost 3 years that we've been working together here on the Thursdays. And thank you very much for everything you do it.
Well,
and
you're welcome.
I know that you have our arguments sometimes, but I think it's always
we
for
are
the
both
best.
strong-minded individuals, my friend. So
It's always for the best, and I don't think we have any sort of problem with that. It's
when you said to me, wear a cool T-shirt, I thought I'll wear the T-shirt that I have at home that says, "I am an engineer. To save time, let's just assume that I'm never wrong."
Okay. I'm gonna keep that in mind next time. Thank you, Dennis.
I mean, you have your ideas for how things have got to be done and your vision. And
no, but what I want to say is, like, after almost 3 years, there's almost no words that I can describe the help that we've been doing with us.
You.
And you know that we are here, most of selling stuff. We're here on a mission to try and literally try to bring the slot cars back. And we kind of think we're kind of doing it. We kind of moving, so changing a little bit this scene.
When you see 25 guys pitch up here for a club race, or you see 50 people at the Slotted Nationals, that's evidence that the things that you're doing is working.
Yeah, the swap meet is a good event for us too. And
all of them.
By the end of the month, by the end of the year, we have the Christmas. That's going to be as big as the Nationals, I believe. The Christmas Enduro. Dennis, thank you again.
You're welcome.